Welcome to MarTalks, the #1 podcast for e-commerce and marketing applications. MarTalks is devoted to covering the latest technology developments that drive the global commerce ecosystem from advertising to last mile. Enjoy all of our content at rosensteingroup.com/MarTalks-podcast.
Well, hey, welcome to another edition of MarTalks. And today we're joined by the John Wicks of executive coaching, which sounds pretty ominous until you figure the guy's written 12 best-selling books on enterprise software sales, spent an entire career in enterprise sales before moving into executive coaching for sellers and turning modest producers and meat producers into multi-million producers. So without further ado, let me introduce you all to Justin Michael. Justin, thank you so much for joining us on MarTalks.
Appreciate you. Daryl, it's great to be here. Just, I guess, in the stars right now. But yeah, it's been a long, strange trip.
Now, as the John Wick of executive coaching, do you get brought in by boards to execute executives on occasion?
No, there are no lives lost. There are plenty of pipelines crushed. I have definitely worked with some really elite reps, especially recently at some of the big companies. Some I can't even say because of NDAs and such, but some of the big guys like Salesforce, Matterport, Proofpoint, all over the world too. I've trained a lot of reps at HubSpot. It's been fun. And I've worked in all the markets from DACH, Germany to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. So yeah, I've been building out methodologies, and it really comes from what you stated is I found that there was a gap, especially with top of funnel being strategic and enterprise. I found that most of the top funnel was very transactional and lacked some of the depth and structure and strategy that you see around 6 and 7 figure complex and strategic deals. There you have a lot of meat on the bone, from Challenger to Spin to Command of the Message to Sandler, right? But when you get to the very top of the funnel, it's more like high volume, pound the phone, sequence hundreds of emails, a lot of that. So I thought, what if I took some of the ethos and philosophy that comes out of the bigger deal cycles and bring that psychology and approach and technique toward the opening piece. And that's kind of where this began. Now, I do a lot of full cycle training, and I'm a jack of all trades, everything outside of writing the code, but that's kind of what my books are known for.
Well, I mean, you spent 13 years as a seller in enterprise, and you were in ad tech, you were in MarTech, you were in mobile before you actually crossed over into training and coaching. And what was it that made you pivot and start working with founders and sales teams instead of staying in the seat and making millions?
Yeah, so I came up in the 2001 sales world of like info packets and telemarketing and pure boiler room. So around 2005-6, around 25-26, I already had 5 years of cold calling under my belt when I started working in SaaS companies. And then it took me another 5 years to get to the bigger companies like Salesforce and move to San Francisco. So when I was basically 37, this company in Silicon Valley recruited me. They did an international search for like the top SDR mind on the planet. And it was called Outbound Works. We had True Ventures behind us, raised a few million. Lars Nilsson, who's famous from Cloudera and Snowflake, was my mentor there. We had Ben Sardella, who was the first NetSuite rep, and he'd built out some great stuff. And so we built up from like 10 clients to 100 doing all the top of funnel. So I had my first taste of sort of early stage founder-esque work. And then I went back to be a VP and used that to just slaughter the role as a VP of sales between like 39 to 41. And those were amazing years. So I basically figured, wait a second, these people who are doing full-time consulting, I hear a lot of stories about them making $100,000 a month. And I wanted to figure out what that was. So I had like 5 or 6 different, Ben Sardella is from Data Nice. That's his claim to fame. So I wanted to go into that and study it. And around 2021, I just launched a consultancy. Now, my first client was Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark, like F45 Fitness. That's kind of funny, indirectly.
No kidding.
My first 4 or 5 months, I was like a wobbly deer, right? I was like, I'm learning to snowboard, and I was falling everywhere and flailing and trying to figure this thing out, reading all the books, trying out systems. Then I went, I'm going to burn the ships, right? And month 5, I did $100,000. Month 9, I did $200,000. And then I kicked myself and I realized, wow, I could have been doing this for the last 15 years on the side. And then I found out, okay, 40% of Americans side hustle, which means that 20, 30, 40% of every VP of sales and CRO and everyone right now in tech is doing consulting and advising. And so I just went for it. When I put out this book called Tech Powered Sales, it did really well. We drove millions of dollars in that. And I built this really robust solo consultancy, started traveling the world, eat, pray, love style. I moved to Dubai. I moved to Italy. And then I ended up in Switzerland, which is interesting.
Well, let's put ourselves in the seat of an investor. And you're the founder. You've raised your Series A. You've got solid mid-market traction. The board's excited, and they say, we're going to go enterprise. We want you to sell enterprise. We want those big logos on the website. 18 months later, the board is having a very different meeting. Walk me through what actually happens typically at that inflection point. Why does it typically blow up for most companies?
Well, yeah. So I'll just call him Jim, but he's been a great influence. But he would go through this, like they're like, we got to go enterprise. And then they hire the guys in suits. But that's like a lot of burn rate to bring in like 5 guys in suits, and then they just throw it at the problem. Well, then we have a longer sales cycle of 6 to 18 months. And so that's going to fall down, right? So I think people jump into it too fast before they have the product market fit. If you're going to go up market, it can be done. I think what made him succeed and ultimately me is because I was so fanatical on the prospecting side, I could find deal cycles that were in the buying window or closer to the quarter. So when you're kind of sitting back and waiting for inbound marketing or waiting for the channel, you're kind of flowing into the slipstream of the 6 to 18 months. What we would do is we would just go prospect the whole account base like mad, and we'd find people literally in the decision process now. And so I've done like a $400K deal in like 90 days before because I caught it from a competitor, got in there, wrestled with the bear. So the advice is if you're going to go enterprise, right, you might want to keep a mid-market movement, a PLG, something to balance it. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You got to be ready for a longer sales cycle. Dedicate time to outbound. It might be a slightly longer sales cycle than inbound, but higher ACV, TCV, lower churn. I'm a bit zealous about the outbound stuff.
Well, the board sees pipeline and they get excited. They see the pipeline growing, they're going to get excited. What are they not seeing?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because there's a bit of an 80-20 rule. Like we're still in this process where anywhere from 60, 70, 80% of the reps are missing quota. So I was like, hiring is really important. I have a lot of clients that are VPs of sales and CROs now that are using psychometric profiling and things like OMG. And I often get brought in to help vet people. Like, is this someone that's going to pull from the front and really be proactive here? Or is maybe in a bigger company modality where there really is a lot of support and marketing and events and there's sort of a lot of gravy flowing? Because depending if you just suddenly click over into enterprise from mid-market, it's going to take some real elbow grease and getting out there. That's the hidden factor. It's going to be harder than you think. I was always the rep that was that kind of pioneer rep of like, I'd come into a company and like, what's the number one deal we should do? And they're like, let's do Facebook. Like that's, so you've been around how long? We've been around 12 years. How much you raised? 12 million. Okay, why didn't you go to Facebook? We're not ready. So then I would like get on the phone and get the meeting with Facebook in like those first 2 weeks. So that's like the kind of stuff I would get to do. I love that. I love going after the impossible company. No one's ever had of me. I have a funny story about that though. I was sitting in New York. They did this search and I don't mean to toot my own horn. They like interviewed, I don't know, like 25,000 reps for this job and I won it. And I got this thing. And then I got in there and I like locked myself in a room in Chinatown and went full boiler room on the phones. And the CEO calls the CSO and the CSO's like, he's not a cultural fit. He just sits in this pod in the back and just rattles the script and leaves messages. So like I'm 2 weeks into the job and I was like, yeah, I got meetings with Coca-Cola, CNN, the Weather Channel, Home Depot, all these Atlanta. I'm covering Atlanta from Manhattan. So then my other boss flies out and he's like, man, you got to calm down. Like you're being so cocky and the other reps are really upset about your claims. And then I booked the flights and I went and I had the meetings. They're like, what? Well, I ended up running the whole division of Top Funnel worldwide for this $100 million venture. And I got promoted and relocated to Seattle after the guy said, oh, we should fire him. So it's kind of funny. And then I got so well known in the New York scene for mobile marketing for doing all the cold calls. This famous CMO from another company calls up. It's like, I just hear your name everywhere. You're getting all the business. What are you doing? I was like, I'm just cold calling. He's like, do you want to do a joint event? He did not want to cold call. It's really funny. That's what I got for you so far. Notes from the trenches.
Being fearless is certainly amongst the top qualities that I've always found in the true hunters out there. It's like, don't tell me what can't be done. everything can be done. It's just a question of how bad you want it and how much time you're going to spend doing it. And being able to qualify that after I've interviewed thousands of enterprise sales executives. And
Interesting.
I can't really describe the feeling that I get in my gut when I know I've got somebody that really understands how to hunt. I use Colby for my profiling just because it's more reliable over time using that cognitive decisioning versus the psychometric, which is very transactional, very transitory, very short term. It's good for capturing the mood in the room, but in terms of really how does this person tackle a problem? What is
Cool.
their preference in terms of how do I go? Am I an aggressive, innovation oriented individual, or do I need to follow somebody else's process, or am I a creator of process? And that's kind of my secret sauce that I bring especially when I'm training a recruiting team for a company. It's like, look, you need to have a rubric that's going to be applicable across the entire organization. And that's done a good thing for me. But you really hit the nail on the head with what you said earlier about a company wanting to go from mid to enterprise, and they go out and they spend $400,000 on a big name VP of sales, and they get 12 months in, realize they hired the wrong guy for the wrong stage. I just see that constantly over and over again. It's like a broken record.
Right.
What are the three biggest hiring mistakes you've seen when companies are at that Series A or B and they decide to go enterprise?
The myth of the Rolodex, which amazingly Millennial and Gen Z don't know what that is. I actually was going to call a book The Golden Rolodex, and like, what's that? So it doesn't matter. Like, even if I have 30,000 capped connections and 60,000 followers, and I come to a company like, well, what's your Rolodex? You're going to open it up. I'm like, nah, you just give me the list. Like, I'll honey badger in, because and familiarity breeds contempt. You can't just keep asking your connections. Introduce me to your friends at Coca-Cola. Like, they hate that. You actually, you can channel in and you can go through team links and things, but that's been the biggest myth, right? Because I see these huge packages go out like 400, 600, even $1 million because they have their Rolodex, and then they come in and that Rolodex doesn't pay off. So I'd rather take the copy salesman from New Jersey who's just going to wear their shoes off than the Rolodex. That was the first one, definitely.
Yeah, Rolodexes are, a thing of the past, and they are a big myth because particularly when it comes to decision making for enterprise software, you got a committee, you got 5, 7, 12 people that are going to be involved in that process, and they're moving around, and who has responsibility at that one account while you're involved in that deal over 6 to 12 months is going to change. So
Totally true.
You're actually going to tell a company, I've done business with General Electric. Terrific. How relevant is that really going to be for that next company with a different offering?
Yep.
However, I will say there's a lot more to be said for having expertise within the same sales motion, within the same size company, within the same vertical of companies, so you understand what their issues are, and coming from a solution that is very similar in terms of what the kinds of problems that it's solving for that business. Yeah, I think particularly in enterprise, if you don't have those fundamentals, you're going into a black hole. I don't think you can necessarily hire the shoe salesman. Well, let's talk a little bit about one of my favorite mistakes is I see a startup and one of the first people they hire is a chief revenue officer or somebody with that title. Which just absolutely is mind-boggling. I'm a big fan of the founders that are out there closing those first dozen deals themselves, and they know enough not even to hire a VP of sales. They hire a really solid rep to essentially capture their IP, capture their process, and make it repeatable so that they can hire a peer. And then if they're ready, make them the VP of sales. Now, when you're advising a company, when do you tell a founder to hire a VP of sales versus a CRO?
Yeah, that's the better setup, right? When you're seed or Series A, to get that VP, give them a point, 2 or 3 points on the deal so they have a ton of ownership in the company. Maybe they can grow into the CRO role. You get these motions where these CEOs and founders also just can't delegate. They have to super close every deal. It's like, well, if you don't train and delegate off to the VP and then delegate off to the SDR team, you haven't really created an engine. You're just micromanaging into all of it. So you're the bottleneck then over it. And then they tell me things like, hey, no one can do what I can do. And that's where I bring in the Billy Bean Moneyball analogy, I was like, you're right. Like to do you need 5 people, or you need 3 different people who have the combined Bo Jackson of what you can do. Michael Jordan went in from basketball to baseball and still did really well. His level of athleticism was nuts. So maybe you can help me parse the advice there. But yeah, it's hard for founders to let go of the sales motion. And then some founders just don't know how to strategically sell, and they're leaving millions of dollars on the table because they're doing transactions and they're winging it. I had a guy hire me and he writes scraper code with LLMs, and he's like, hey, I'm talking to Procter & Gamble. I was like, that's awesome. Do you have like an M&A in place? What's that? Do you have like an MSA? What's that? So I was like, well, why don't I just teach you how to do enterprise sales so they don't eat your lunch? You're being fed to the wolves right now. Like, you better get ready for this because it's not going to be fun in procurement.
Well, I mean, my favorite when I first sit down with a founder and I say is, okay, so who are your prime competitors? And they'll name off a couple of startups that are Series A or B. I'm like, well, what about Salesforce? Or what about Adobe? It's like, don't they have a product that kind of sort of roughly maps to yours that they've spent, I don't know, $50 million marketing to your customers?
Yeah.
Do you not realize that you're in competition with them, whether you really are or not? They're going to tell their customers they are. It's going to hamstring your deal forever. Are you aware that you're going to need to hire somebody that's going to be able to or has sold against them?
Yeah. That's really smart. I like that.
You talk about founders that don't want to let go or delegate their sales process, which they have to do if they're going to scale. It's got to be faster. It can be faster. It can be more efficient. It can be more repeatable, but not if they're doing it. And they're never going to be able to also vision for the company if they're neck deep in the deals, because that's going to be their sole focus. I've certainly worked with PE and VC-backed companies where the investor comes in and tries to manage the sales team like an engineering team, where they're metrics obsessed. I mean, they buy Salesforce, they've got all these fancy reports, but they totally miss out on the human element. What goes wrong when a board thinks they understand enterprise sales, but they actually don't?
Yeah, the human element is massive. We had this just joke about everything's $1.2 million because from the challenger sale, it became really apparent that a lot of reps just want to skirt around the money conversation and taking things into 6 and 7 figure deal land. We're in this world of like pilots and PLG and getting people in really quickly, but it's really hard to take a prospect or a client from a small amount of money and get them into those bigger ranges of closing. Now, I've read The Jolt Effect by Matt Dixon, and I think it's Get It Right McKenna.
That link will be in the highlights. That's a great book.
Good pull, right? So it's really interesting because it's kind of like outliers and elite athletes. Like that research shows that the fear of messing up, it's better to do the pilot, but have the milestones and the tranches and have here's the pilot for $100,000 and then that unlocks another $300,000 and $300,000. But I have traveled with a breed of seller that's been able to do multi-million deals off the front. Now, I was trained by Todd Capone, who has the 4 levels of negotiation. I've been telling him to write that book since he trained me at Salesforce, and I put it in some of my books. So, but the risk is so high on some of those cowboy deals when you're going out to do the massive deal and anchor it at the C level and start at the top, that it's just not the advice that all reps should use, because the level of skill and sophistication you need to do that in this climate, it's very tough. So yeah, I think like there's a dying art form of the 6 and 7 figure deal closer doing these transformational massive deals. Another thing is like, I'm working with a client down in Australia. He just did a $2 million deal. I mean, this thing took like 36 months to lock down. This took time. He has to have other closes to make his number along the way while that mega deal is moving. So somebody I really like is Jamal Reimer. If you know him, he wrote a book called Mega Deal
I've had
Secrets.
Jamal on the show. I'm a huge fan. One of the guys you trained.
Well, I mean, it's at his level, right? It's like a mutual collaboration. We're just musicians jamming. That's how I see it. But yeah, he's really humble and really cool and the real deal. But yeah, I think, and then like Ian Koniak's great too. I think like you really have to still have the courage, goes back to our original comment, to go after some of those massive deals and have the vision to go early because it will come in. But it's moving on a different timeline. It takes a lot of patience, hundreds of emails, herding of cats.
Hundreds of emails.
Yeah, I had a thread with like 300 emails on it. I closed this deal with a a subsidiary where the main investor was Jeffrey Katzenberg, and it was with a Coast Guard lieutenant, and it was on the last day of the year on the quarter, and the guy goes dark. Now, we probably cold called everyone on his team, like, I don't know, 15 times. We were doing 3-way cold calls. I had like my CEO, CRO, we're calling in 3-way. We just started like kibitzing. I guess the word is, we just started like kind of teasing the guy. We're like, look, we're at this point, we're going to hire away your team. Like, we're going to call Jeffrey Katzenberg now and let him know about the hires. Nothing happened. And like around 11:30 on New Year's, he finally responds. He's like, you guys, I don't know who you are. You are hilarious. I read every single email. This is hilarious. He finally picks up the phone. It's like, here's the thing. I'm trying to prove to my team that we're not going to buckle and do deals like this. And we were like, well, what do you want? And he's like, well, we want like a 5% discount. And we're like, okay, cool. He's like, I want to have a bite out of the apple so I can show the team that we won here. It's a win-win. And then we did the deal. But the level of persistence, zaniness, creativity, GIF bombing, like anyone else would think like, wow, there's this guy's going to get, we'd met with him. We talked to him, right? But he just ghosted us on the holiday. We were so fearless and so hysterical, and we just refused to give in. And I think at one point he just wore down and cracked.
There's something to be said for guerrilla marketing. There's something to be said for persistence. It's humor. It's that human connection that AI is never going to replace. I was just speaking to Rich Lyons a couple weeks ago, and one of the masters of enterprise e-commerce transformation, the founder of the Lyons Group and Lyons Consulting, and he said he sees people burning out on getting these increasingly slick AI marketing emails, and a resurgence of people just looking forward to that human connection and looking for that person who differentiates themselves by being a human, by making mistakes, by saying crazy things and taking risks. And I think he's right.
Well, you would think that I'm teaching reps how to use like linguistics and how to kind of guardrail that with something I call heuristics, which is a big word that just means shortcuts. My father was a linguistics PhD. People are like, hey, Jam, like you're going to be passe, man. Like your stuff's going away. Because look, I just did it in Claude. And then I read it and I'm like, vanilla, slop. I'm like, it's not going away because you have to understand the acumen of reading the P&L and how the business works and how to like speak CXO, which we're kind of taught at Salesforce, right? Financial acumen. And then if it spits out slop, you have to sort of de-slopify it. I don't know how else to explain it. It's got to sound like how executives actually talk. And there's more of like a staccato style where things are really short and not perfectly grammatically kind of bulleted, and just ways and means of doing it. And so that's a lot of what I'm working on now. It's like, well, you have the insight and you've agonized over this like 2-page email with every last research Claude thing. 20% is open and one person clicked. So the likelihood of anyone ever seeing that email is 0. So you have to like call, leave it on a voicemail with like some intrigue. You got to hit them on LinkedIn. You got to hit multiple channels just to get that one idea. And you don't have time for the 15 bullet points, right? So this is old school stuff. It's very effective.
Well, kind of hop back for a second, because I think that we have to exhaust a particular thought about building the go-to-market team. And I guess my question is, if a Series B investor came to you and they were going to write a $20 million check and they said, evaluate this company's go-to-market team, what would you look at in your first 30 minutes?
Wow. I really love the concept of one sales analysis and looking where people have been winning deals and then sort of reverse engineering that, because there's the idea of reinventing the wheel and coming in and being like, we're putting in MarTech and we're doing this. And there's a reason there was some initial traction. So can I study that and deconstruct that, right? One of the pitfalls is really an over-reliance right now on automation and AI. Like all this outbound stuff. Like I wrote this book, Cool Call Algo, and it's not about replacing the reps with AI. It's basically saying, where can you elevate the process before, during, and after calls by using artificial intelligence? And so the first idea there was, this is an enterprise methodology for top of funnel. That didn't exist. And I'm not knocking all the people that write books. And I know there are elements of things like Sandler where there's like some notes on top funnel, but I'm going deep, like a 200-page book just about enterprise, top funnel, and then AI injected. And so I think you've got to have heavy phone for customer discovery. You have to have people doing groundswell techniques, learning what's going on with the customer, top down, middle out, bottom up. And you have to have some bold approaches. I mean, 80% of my clients, I've trained 200 teams, 80% of them are still driving all the enterprise business off the phone. What does that tell you? Only 20% of people pick up. 7% of the data set is cell phones. So they're also over relying on that. Like Connect and Sell studied 10 million dials and 50% are human navigated, which is IVRs and phone trees. What happened in COVID is if I call for Daryl, you have a phone forwarding to your cell phone. So I just push 3-1 and it goes off to your phone. So I think like having a contact strategy, at least in the pipeline where you're going to talk to humans, is very hard. Like if 35% of time is spent selling and almost no one talks to humans. That's the weirdest part, the silent sales floor right now. So you need to construct a tech stack that gets high touch and high talk. Events will do it. Traveling places will do it. That can be expensive. But the human to human element and optimizing that through your tech stack will give you tremendous edge. It'll speed you up by 2 years, many years.
So where do you think the most productive place for a company to invest in AI in software sales is?
Well, I think there's a technology called TitanX. Have you heard of this?
Yes.
They raised a bunch of money, this guy, Joey Gilkey, and they basically take your data set, all your Zoom info and Lead IQ, and they run algorithms and all this big data AI crunching. And they just tell you, Daryl doesn't pick up the phone, leave him a voicemail, or he would prefer email. So there's like channel validated, knowing the tier ones, like these are people that pick up the phone. That type of thing is really powerful because you've got people that are costing you $100,000 for just an SDR, and they're sitting there and they're having 2 conversations in a day on 5 hours of call attempts. So like, I think that's a really good place to invest with using artificial intelligence to unlock the efficiency. The iOS 26 kind of gate is really hard because now, okay, Daryl's got a screener and I can't just wing it. I need a POV that could be generated with AI so I can get through the block. Then it's like, generally, like, so one thing Jamal's doing is this company Wiser.ai, where he's using a basket of LLMs to get a point of view, which we were trained on right back in the day. It's like the Oracle training. It's like, okay, read the 10K, the 10Q, the Def 14 proxy statement, the board notes in Europe, read that stuff. And then we'd be scanning through a 10K, be like threats, page 26, we're listening to minutes at the board. Like this stuff was hard. Only top people were able to do that. But now it can sift through all of that instantaneously and pull out multiple points of view and tie that to current events and just build a point of view. And one thing Jill Conrath once said was to be consultative, be assumptive. So I think like a lot of the reps face the empty suit because the LLM generated the point of view. They didn't really validate it and they didn't get a business case or a hypothesis of how they can help the customer make money, save money, reduce risk, satisfy regulation. I come in with everyone and I hear them out, but I'll always just make great assumptions out of expertise. Again, Jolt effect, guiding, leading. Here's what I think is wrong. Justin, you're totally wrong. Cool. Because it's not on LinkedIn. There's all this insider baseball. There's all this stuff that happens if you get on the phone with someone. Our CMO actually just left. We're actually going to move off Marketo. We're going to move on to Marketo, whatever it is. And that's not going to be in the research. You can't pull it out of an LLM. So yeah, use the LLMs to have a point of view that's sound, so they can see you did the level of effort in the work and they know you're not an empty suit, and that's okay. Then you can adjust. So there's just a wide variety, a smattering of ideas, no set opinion.
Those are great. And I'm a big fan of TitanX. And the only issue that I've seen is, and again, a huge fan of Wiser and what Jamal has done. And I've certainly referred clients there as well. It's you need the financial data that's public and publicly traded companies. If you're not targeting them, a lot harder to get that point of view. It really comes down to how much about that business itself, and try to tie it back to what are the issues that their big publicly traded competitors are dealing with, and say, well, theoretically you're dealing with some of the same issues, but right now in MarTech and commerce specifically, the buyer keeps shifting. The CMO had budget. Now it's the chief digital officer. Now it's the chief technical officer with an AI line item. Now it's the CFO. I mean, how should a VP of sales be repositioning their team's targeting right now? And is this a coaching problem or is that really a hiring?
Well, this depends on kind of what you're targeting, but targeting is a huge issue because there's like, does intent data even work? And I know there's been some really good progressions around that. And some people swear by things like 6 Sense or Bombora and where that's going. I really liked my mentor, Tony Hughes, the three states of business, which is the business is growing, it's flat, or it's going down. Now, when I'm working with private companies or targeting private companies, headcount is the biggest deal because the minute the economy jitters, there's all these rifts, reduction of force. So if I'm on the phone with the company and they're saying, hey, we don't have budget for that, and I'm like, you just hired 15 salespeople, you just hired 20 engineers. Like, if they're growing headcount, it's a proxy for growth and for some kind of profit, even if it's debt financed or it's the war chest and they're spending VC money. So I look at that a lot because I'm all into the trigger events, job changes, hidden growth factors, a lot of the stuff that you could look for using LLMs, but you might not normally see. I mean, just hitting companies because of the funding rounds is too generic. I mean, you get funding and then you get 1,000 vendor emails. So you have to be really innovative and creative with the type of signal-based prospecting that you use to try to get into accounts. A lot of the mid-market AEs, they have 200 accounts, 500 accounts. I've even seen SMBs where they have 10,000 accounts. So like, how do you not boil the ocean? And then when you're in the bigger major accounts for these senior account executives, they might have 20 or 10 that they're using. And then I'm going in with like 100 handshakes, that Mike Fiasconi software, and I'm like mapping Nestle. And we're spending like 3 hours and that thing looks like a Death Star. I mean, going in like, here's the Swiss divisions and here's the Canadian, and just mapping.
We've touched on AI here, and it's a poignant topic, obviously, working with as many companies that are AI native now as I am, and I'm sure you are. But the question is coming up now that since AI is reshaping that whole outbound motion, the uncomfortable question for a lot of investors is, does AI mean you need to hire fewer reps to generate the same pipeline? And if yes, what does that do to your Series A headcount model?
Well, I just haven't quite seen it in fruition. I mean,
Neither have I.
So the big thing is like a certain company laid out this whole AI strategy, let go of a bunch of reps, and now they're hiring thousands of reps to go sell it. So I haven't seen a huge exodus of the SDR, BDR market as of yet. I've seen some really compelling solutions. I think it's pretty cool to see the Wolf of Wall Street on that. What was it? Artisan or 11x, some of these techs, AI SDR type thing. If you can prove out the model, you can do it. But if you're going after enterprise deals, like I just worked with a client in the UK, raised 100 million, we're strategic. Companies like Orem are doing power dialing now and not always the parallel assisted dialing, because if you've got an enterprise, you cannot hit the CFO with 26 auto dialed calls and 42 sequence of emails. Like, you got to have a laser point of view, go slow, voicemail, omni-channel, work with the gatekeeper and the executive assistant. It's a dance. It has to be done carefully, like the game of operation. You can't bombard it like you used to. So can you replicate that with AI? I mean, it just depends. I think if the company has an SMB or mid-market motion, some of that stuff in the admin can be picked up. But I think we're in a renaissance now of strategic selling.
We've got a situation where you made a distinction. And I want to highlight this for the audience because this is kind of crucial today. There's a difference between using AI for your outbound and for getting your point of view and just producing that vanilla slop at that C-level. Can you walk me through what failure mode looks like? Because I think most founders don't recognize when their team is doing it.
Yeah. Well, it spits out some interesting copy that's sort of good-ish, that seems like it would be interesting. But the minute there's a synthetic element to it, or it's obviously ChatGPT, imagine the person receiving it, especially if that trigger is obvious. So scan their profile, read their latest activity, look for something unusual. Take the point of view from the business context and add something personal into it. Like if they just posted about a book or a charity they're doing or some event, so they can kind of see that there is a human touch in it. And then read it out loud and make sure it's in your own voice and that you're writing like you talk. But if it's not writing like you talk and it sounds like something out of Forrester or Gartner or an MBA, like they know that's not a rep. And they read it and they're like, slop. So yeah, you're better off banging it out on your thumbs, on your smartphone. And remember, leaders speak the language of outcomes and risk. They care about a business case from the front. They care about return on investment, opportunity costs. They care about threats and weaknesses. And there just has to be a developed point of view. It can't be empty. It can't be generic. So I have this list of heuristics that help you on emails. I mean, specificity is huge. Brevity is huge. Social proof is big. Use cases, differentiation, IP. But fear and pain is also really important, that you're really making them feel understood for their challenges and walking a mile in their shoes. It's a tall order to be able to do that. I know the promises of AI is like, wow, it understands the CFO. We're not there yet. The CFO say, oh, you think you understand me? Slop. Talk to your own CFO and get their opinion. Be like, hey, I'm sending this to the CFO of my biggest client. A lot of reps, they won't even email or go after their biggest account. They kind of sandbag it because they're too scared they're going to get, it's like, ooh, I can't contact Amazon. Face the blowtorch. Go after your big accounts early. If you're going after C-levels, test your copy on your own internal C-levels in your company. Get them to be candid. I got a thick skin. Would you? Nah, it looks like slop. It's synthetic. I wouldn't. You don't really have a business case there. Clear your own internal editors. That would be my best advice.
That goes to what I try to instill in companies that are hiring their first true revenue leader, first true VP of sales or CRO, particularly CRO. It's like you're making the transition from a development-led organization to a sales-led organization, and that's product-led development in its truest form, which means everybody on your executive team especially is in sales and is part of the motion. And it should be expected that they're going to make a contribution to how you sell your product, how you market your product. And what you're talking about there, having your CFO sit down with your head of sales or your top rep and vet messaging. Absolutely, man. That's what
Good
they're
idea.
there for.
They're happy to do it. Everyone's like, oh, they're too busy. Like I've had awesome conversations with our general counsel and our CFO. Like I was always with the C-levels getting their intel on things. Yeah. I once worked for this guy, Ryan Buma, and he worked for Mark Hurd at Oracle and he ran the whole ISV. He came to our company too and is a CCO, and you always say, everybody prospects. And even as the chief commercial officer running sales and marketing, he was doing prospecting. And he got our CFO to do prospecting, which was like, what? I mean, it's the oldest game in town, right? Everyone's responsible to grow the company. Just be referrals, just getting the word out. It's really powerful when you have a network where everyone's reaching out and creating opportunity.
By the same token, it's a huge red flag for me when I'm interviewing the first VP of sales for a company and they're not coming across with who they're going to prospect into and what accounts they think they can potentially bring or what calls that they're going to make. That's like, I don't think you're really cut out for a startup. You've got to be hustling too.
I had this amazing GM named Jim Magello, and a lot of my books are inspired by him. He'd play ice hockey and he would box, and he had this dog that he would bring in that was like a werewolf. This thing was like a hound. It was like the French bulldog, and it would snivel and eat all the chairs. And he would come in as the GM of the business, and for like 1 hour a day, like clockwork, he'd sit down on the Polycom in the biggest conference room and he'd prospect in Salesforce. And it was the coolest thing ever to watch because he'd hit him up and he'd hit so hard with so much confidence, and he'd leave these voicemails and then he'd follow up. And this became like inspiration for this combo prospecting book. But I was always just stunned by that because I hadn't worked for a lot of leaders that even GMing the business were like owning it every day to the prospecting. So we set up this trip in Chicago, like neighborhood technique. And we just started like, hey, we're coming to Chicago. And we just called everybody there together. And we lined them all up, man. We had great meetings. So I love seeing that. Now, that's not a micromanage because he would note he only did it an hour a day. He's contacting very high-level people, following up on leads that were falling through. He's setting an example as the leader. And then we had this QBR once at another company I worked for a couple of times. We're sitting there in San Francisco, and we got like 200 people together in this office. And he's like, well, how's the reps? Like, what did you close? And this rep's like, just nobody picks up the phone anymore, or you can't get through. And he goes into the CRM, he gets to Spotify, picks a phone number, and it's like 7 p.m. on the West Coast. And he picks the phone and he gets through and he books a meeting. I don't know if this was staged. Like it just really felt like a scene. Looking back on it now, it's very Jerry Maguire or something out of it. But it had a big impact. That might have been staged, actually. I don't think so. I think it was real. Just pretty powerful.
You're going to have to follow up with him now. Now we're all going to want to know.
No,
Was that real?
This guy is the real deal. I'm sure it was real because I watched this guy do miraculous cold calling. I mean, part of it is your CRM is a gold mine for the actual direct dials, and people don't even mine the deadwood or go in there. So I was doing really heavy prospecting as a rep at this company, and I got a complaint. I think like Dow Jones was like, call off your dogs and contact the CEO. And Jim, in front of the entire company, is like, he got the first complaint. He should be promoted. Who else gets a complaint? Not that we were harassing people, but I was actually just assertively doing my job. That was my target account. I kept calling the account. So that's kind of spirit you need even to this day, because that's the only way you're going to get through that white wall of noise of all the AI slop and the robo dialing and everything. Like your reps, somebody's going to have to contact a human and have a real conversation. The bots can't just talk. So I'm kind of like a Luddite or anachronist here. I wrote tech-powered sales for goodness sake, but I'm really pushing the human thing.
Well, it's multi-channel. I mean, it's multi-channel. I think it's certainly to prep, particularly in enterprise. I think it's incumbent upon marketing to have had some sort of branding awareness campaign so that these executives that you're calling into have some frame of reference for what problem you're theoretically addressing or hopefully addressing. But you've got to make that human connection, and that's with your voice. I see a higher connect rate with video calls than I do with voice calls. And I see a higher connect rate with leaving a verbal message on things like LinkedIn that people I'm connected to than just sending them a note. But it is multi-channel. We're in a multi-channel world, and it shows that you're not just a robot following up on one thing. And I love the fact that you got the promotion for getting the complaint. If you're going to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. And one of my first bosses tell me, yeah, I mean, one of my first bosses told me, hey, if we're not getting complaints about you making calls, you're not doing your job.
Yeah, so that's how I got the nickname, the honey badger and the hummingbird and the machine, because I took that Jeb Blunt stuff really literally. I called this guy Brian Wool for like 75 days in a row. And then I saw the guy at like a happy hour and he laughed. He was a good sport about the whole thing. But I just used to call this guy Brian Wool at New Star like every single day and leave a voicemail. I just did it like as if I were Dory the fish, as if I'd just fallen onto the planet for the first day. I'm like, Brian, Justin Michael. And I just always do it. I just warm up by calling Brian Wool. So then I guess Jeb Blunt did one where he called for 100 straight days and he closed $1 million deal. And it was like this was the most controversial element of the book Combo Prospecting with Tony Hughes, where I was the case study. It was like, but if you have patient persistence and a sophisticated way, anytime I've ever been told, do not call, take me off the list, I've 100% always opted out. I always have.
Yeah. I mean, it's that's kind of the lesson to all this. Yes, there's prospects that are going to self-select for you.
True.
But you've got to give them the option. You've got to actually reach out to them for them to do so. They don't do it until you've actually reached them.
In enterprise, I call it the art of confusion, because if you look at the old Jim Holden stuff around the power-based selling and the situational power-based, and it's very difficult in these giant accounts to figure out who's who in the zoo. Like, who handles agentic AI? I don't know. It's so new. Who handles your agentic governance? Like, I don't know. Like, you call the CIO, he's too busy. They send you down a black hole into some kind of like API division. So what I do is I go in, and so I had this client, I won this deal, and I have these Venn diagrams that I build. And so they just start sending Venn diagrams everywhere. And like, eventually it's just kind of like seeing a UFO or a crop circle. And then it's always just like Karen comes out and goes, hey, that's my division. Stop contacting everyone. So if you light up an enterprise company that's matrixed enough and contact enough people all at once, like a swarm of bees, ultimately someone will be like, hey, stop contacting us. That's John's team. And so I kind of use that as an approach strategy, because what happens is if you get to the C level, they block, hey, don't bother the team. We'll get to it. And like 2 years go by. If you go to the low level folks, you can't go above them because then they feel bypassed. So it's like you have to kind of be everywhere at once and surround sound in the beginning so that they sort of stop the music like a cakewalk and they're like, actually, Jane's working on that. Talk to their team. And then they're kind of grateful and they stop the prospecting everywhere else. So that's kind of how I've broken into some of these giant accounts too, is just showing up everywhere with like really creative imagery. Yeah, I know we're a little bit out of time, but it's been a true pleasure to connect.
Well, I mean, I've got tons of stuff that I want to ask you that we didn't get a chance to, but I guess what we have to do right now is I want to give the folks that are listening a couple of things they can do Monday morning with their team.
Okay.
You've trained over 1,000 enterprise sellers, over 200 teams. If you could give a VP of sales at, let's say, a Series B MarTech or commerce company 2 technology tools to put on their team's desk on Monday morning, not the whole stack, you get 2. What would they be and why?
Okay, well, I'll give you a couple really interesting ones that were in a company I was just at. One was called Kappa.ai, Kapa.ai, and it's an SE, but it's an AI SE. And these reps were calling enterprise companies and were getting stuck with these technical questions about like Google Apogee, X Edge, all these things, and they would like on the fly in real time, start talking to the AI SE and asking it spec questions and strategic questions. And it's trained on your data and situations, not just going wide to ChatGPT. So that's pretty cool to have like this virtual SE on. I could name some other solutions to do that. The second one is probably this other company called Twain.com, which is like Mark Twain. And it is in the element of like a really good B2B writing tech. But what was also cool is this team was phone only, and the RevOps layer had actually figured out all the triggers. So for the white paper downloads and the event follow-up and even the post-call follow-up, it just automatically triggered sequences. Twain would like ingest the profile and then write these emails. So those are like just some, and each of those companies has like 100 competitors. So look for something that's a virtual SE and look for something that's like next generation writing. And then I would say, hey, don't just trust the machine, push the button, send Daryl the message, have like a human editor to test quality, to A/B test quality. It's pretty good though, right? It's pretty good. That's what I got.
Well, last question. This is on the methodology side. 2 specific changes a VP of sales could introduce this week that would measurably move the needle, move their open rates, their response rates, or close rates, whatever it is.
Well, I think that there's been a movement away from C-level selling and a deprioritization of going in high at the C-level. It's considered almost like an older school move. It takes a lot of courage to do it, but I think that's key. I see in pipelines a lot of kicking of the can and aging and deals that are over 300 or 400. And I remember John McMahon's book, like there's just a lot of sandbagging and funny business in there. Like get straight about your real pipeline, even if that takes your number down. I think a critical thing is, do you really have a compelling event or compelling reason, no matter what qualification methodology that you use? Because there's just a lot of hope in the pipe, stuff that isn't real. So reintroduce C-level calling, clean out your pipeline, and get a really good compelling or critical event or compelling reason. I have a client who's a CRO. We were talking about how important that is. Yeah. That's a lot of what I've been focused on.
Well, Justin, it has been spectacular. There's actually going to be a list of links that are going to go out with this for all your fellow authors that I'm sure they're going to be thrilled with. And we're going to have you back because there's just so much more to talk about. I've really enjoyed it. It's been terrific.
Thanks, Daryl. Feelings mutual. What a blast. Great to see you.
Thanks for listening to MarTalks, the #1 podcast for e-commerce and marketing applications. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and while you're at it, leave a rating and review. To find out more about how the Rosenstein Group can help you find the right leaders for your client development teams in MarTech and e-commerce, please visit our website at rosensteingroup.com.